G'day, Geoff Lewis here from Seriously Series. Today what I wanted to talk about is a modification that you can use on your more classic off-road going vehicle to give it that edge in modern day traffic. What is it? What is it all about? Well, I'm going to be doing a review on the Roamerdrive. That's right, the Canadian built Roamerdrive Overdrive unit. A little while ago I did quite a considerable trip in the Series 3, would have been about 2,000 k's or so, and I obviously gave this unit a thorough test. So I'm going to let you know about some of the results of this trip and obviously some of the pros of actually looking at fitting a good quality overdrive unit to your Series Land Rover. So if this is something of interest, you know what to do. Stay tuned. Okay, welcome to the inside of the Series 3 Land Rover. Now, just move that out of the way, bit of housework. Now, you can't really see a huge amount of what we're going to be talking about today, but I'll do my best to endeavour to get you in where I can. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video is I was telling many people that I was going to fit a Roamerdrive unit to the Series 3. Now, the reason for fitting the Roamerdrive unit is due to obviously the vast distances that I need to cover in this vehicle in Western Australia. The other reason is that there is a big distance between fuel stops here in Western Australia too. So obviously having something that's going to obviously decrease the actual wear and tear on the drivetrain is absolutely vital, and the other thing is to obviously increasing the fuel economy of the actual car too. So anything that improves that, in my mind, in this situation is a well worth investment. Now, prior to this, I'd never driven a vehicle with a Roamerdrive unit in it. I'd actually never ever seen one. I'd only ever seen a picture online and heard of a few people that had them in their actual vehicles. I obviously did my research, and one of the things I found was that it didn't matter what forum I went on, what website I went on, there was actually no bad publicity whatsoever in regards to the Roamerdrive unit. Now that's really impressive, and I'll talk more about why that is the case in regards to this unit a bit later on in the video. The overall kit that you get with the Roamerdrive unit is actually really good. And why do I think it's really good? Because I can see that someone has put a great deal of time and effort into thinking it through. The instructions are absolutely fantastic. Even if you're not the most mechanically minded individual, you'll be able to follow it through step by step with relative ease. The other fantastic thing is the quality of the product itself. The thing I love about this, and I actually learnt more about it when after I purchased it initially, because I had a wonderful chat to the owner of Roamerdrive, and he was telling me a little bit about how they test the actual kit itself, how they've developed it, and much more. The actual kit is obviously handcrafted, or it looks like it's been handcrafted, and I just love that finish. It fits the Land Rover really well. The other thing is too is the quality, as I was mentioning earlier. The linkages that are actually used for the actual unit to the Roamerdrive Overdrive unit itself are the same as you would actually use on an aircraft. So that's really impressive. Made to last. The bearings inside the Roamerdrive unit too are designed in a particular way that they are a very common bearing to actually be able to acquire, which is fantastic if you're in the back and beyond or remote parts of the world and you're trying to track down those bearings. There's nothing worse if you're trying to track down a very unique bearing. It can, instead of waiting a couple of days, you can end up waiting a couple of weeks. So very well thought through. So how do you use a Roamerdrive unit, I hear you say? Well, it's actually really easy. Typically how I used it on the trip, and the trip that I actually did was across a number of different terrains. And basically, initially I was using it on the highway, so I would start off using the actual normal ratio in high range. In the Land Rover, I'd change up to first, second, third and fourth, and then once getting up to sort of probably about 50 miles an hour or 80 kilometers, 75 kilometers an hour, I would then obviously have this engaged in fourth, and then I would just simply depress the clutch, and you must depress the clutch, and then I would push it forward, and bang, it'd be engaged. And that's it. Because the Roamerdrive unit itself actually has synchro cones inside it, you don't need to double clutch or anything. It's very, very user friendly. The other fantastic thing about the Roamerdrive unit, and this is why I think it's a much better modification if you can afford it, because they do cost quite a bit, but they're worth every cent, I'll tell you that now. The reason why I think it's better going down this road is because if you look at a high ratio transfer case or high ratio differentials, which are actually in this vehicle, it can be an absolute pain off-road and on-road, and that's what I found. I found the gearing was simply too tall, and I was having to work the motor too hard, and it just really made the actual driving experience or the motoring experience in this vehicle not fun at all. And that's not why I drive Land Rovers. I drive Land Rovers because I really enjoy the motoring experience. It's miles per gallon, not miles per gallon in a Land Rover, and you know, any other classic off-road going vehicle. So what I wanted was obviously something that I could engage and disengage, and the fantastic thing about this is I can actually do that not just in high range but in low range too. And they say in the manual that, or the instruction manual, that this is fantastic on sand, and I actually used it on sand. Because going around the southwest of WA, there's all these beautiful beaches. So after travelling on the highway, flat as a tack, getting down to the southwest, going through some hilly terrain, and then getting down to the beach, I just simply put it into low range, and then obviously engage the Roamerdrive, and it gives me a split between high range and low range. How fantastic is that? Because low range in the series Land Rovers is really their party trick. It's very, very low in its ratio. But the problem is on sand, it's a little bit too low. So this gives you a really good split, and obviously allows you to get a bit more momentum to get up the sand dunes. Because high range itself, the gear ratio is obviously a little bit too high, and the motor simply doesn't have the power. So really, really effective. So off-road applications are absolutely fantastic. In hilly terrain, really, really well worth it. It gives you a fantastic split between third and fourth. Fourth I generally find to be a little bit too tall. Third I find to be a little bit too low. But this was fantastic. And the southwest of WA is quite hilly, so this was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It meant I could sit at, I think, about 50 miles an hour, or about 75 k's an hour to 70 kilometers an hour in sort of third gear, as opposed to about probably maybe 60 or 50. I'm doing this all off the top of my head, so take it with a grain of salt. But really, really effective. So I really think in that mind it's got me sold. One of the fantastic things about the unit itself, in talking to Ray at Roamerdrive, or talking to the owner of Roamerdrive itself, was that these units aren't just tested in Canada. They're actually tested all over the world. They go on trips and they use these in their own vehicles. So they've been tested in Africa, they've probably been tested in Australia too. So this is really important for me because the climate in Canada is vastly different to that here in Western Australia. And you can see this with some of the added bits of kit you can actually get for the Roamerdrive unit itself. Now, this leads me on to why not fit a fairy overdrive. Well, the fairy overdrive is probably more period correct for this vehicle, but in Australia, from what I've read, and I've never owned one in a vehicle, the issue is that basically the only oil supply they have, from what I've read, is actually in the unit itself, and it gets incredibly hot over here. We were driving in temperatures around about 40 degrees or plus 40 degree temperature, and if I had a fairy unit, the oil that was in it would actually just simply vaporize and get expelled out the top. It's worse enough with the actual transmission in these things, because when you get above 35 degrees centigrade, the oil starts warming up and there's obviously a little breather at the top and it starts pumping vapor out the top of it. And it's not a bad thing though, because it cocoons the whole transmission and everything else underneath the car, and you get a bit of rust prevention before you go down to the beach. Perfect, and that way your car's not going to rust. Not too bad. But that's one of the reasons I didn't go for a fairy overdrive. One of the fantastic things that you can actually purchase with your Roamerdrive unit on top of the actual SS overdrive kit, which is the kit that you want for your series Land Rover, is an actual plate. This plate replaces the steel plate that's actually on the transfer case itself. Now, by actually taking the steel plate off and putting this new plate on, it actually has great deal of advantages. The advantages with the new plate is it's made up of the same alloy as the actual transfer case itself. So when the transfer case is heating up and cooling down, what can happen with the steel, because steel is obviously heats up and cools down differently to that of alloy, what can actually happen is it can end up generating leaks around the gasket and obviously cause the nuts to slowly come loose over time, obviously causing more oil leaks. But actually having a plate that's made up of the same alloy, it cools down at the same rate and you don't get this problem. So it's really big advantage there. The other thing is too, this plate has a series of ribs on it, so it increases its overall surface area. So that means more air can actually hit that plate or that piece of actual alloy and help to cool it down, and that can obviously in turn aid the cooling down of the oil in the actual transfer case itself. So another big advantage to be had there too. One thing I will say, and it's something that you need to keep in mind, particularly with your series transmission and obviously your Roamerdrive unit itself, and this doesn't just go for Land Rovers, it goes for any classic off-road going vehicle, and basically what they stipulate is that you need to use a GL4 gear oil, or a GL4 oil that is actually designed to go in a gearbox, not in a axle, in a gearbox. And the problem is nowadays that there is a lot of GL5 oil, mineral oil, getting around there on the market. Now, there's a lot of contention about it on forums and all the rest. Some people say putting a GL5 oil inside an older transmission, no problem at all. The GL5 in itself is said to obviously corrode brass products inside the actual transmission itself. So this means obviously all your synchro cones inside it, a lot of your fittings are actually made out of brass. So this could actually engender issues down the track, and obviously prematurely wear the synchro cones in the gearbox. So they stipulate at Roamerdrive that you use a GL4 oil, and obviously if you use a GL5 oil, and I believe this to be correct, and you've been using it for the life of the Roamerdrive unit, and you find that the synchros go and you want a refund, you won't be able to get a refund. They will not honour the warranty. So these guys have been building these Roamerdrive units for nearly 20 years, I think, so they really know their stuff. So make sure you use GL4 oil in your transmission in your series vehicle. Obviously they do stipulate too, and this is one of the things I like also, if you're in a warmer climate, particularly here in WA over the summer months, they say to use an 80 W90 as opposed to a 75 W90 in the actual transfer case itself. and that's really important to do. If you're going into a hotter climate, you want to put a bit more, slightly more viscous oil in your actual running gear of your car. But anyway, I think that pretty much covers just about everything in regards to the Roamerdrive unit itself. We're going to be taking this on a big trip later in the year, as I talked about in our update video, as we travel from the red centre of Australia right down to the Australian Bight. So it's going to get plenty of use on sand, plenty of use probably in a little bit of mud, and obviously on some pretty hard corrugated roads too. So it'll be interesting to do a little bit of a reflection review on this bit of kit, and obviously other bits of kit on the vehicle itself too. Anyway, look, I hope you found this video and this bit of chat on the actual Roamerdrive unit itself helpful. And obviously, if you've been following our channel for a while, you're really enjoying the content that's coming out here at Seriously Series, please consider joining us on Patreon by clicking on the Patreon icon at the top right hand corner of your screen. And if you're new to the channel and just figuring out what it's all about here at Seriously Series, click on that subscribe button down below, click on the notification button too. Furthermore, before I go, if you want to find out more about the Roamerdrive unit itself, look in the content section down below and I'll actually put the link to their website. Another thing to keep in mind too, they actually do make a very nice starter motor that can fit to your Series 2 or Series 2A. So if you're looking at it for a bit of an upgrade to start the new year, check it out. Well worth it. Anyway, thanks for watching and I hope to see you in our next video.